very pleased today to have Charles Hyde. Charles is the president of the director of the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site, and he's going to give us an update on that for us. Charles?
Well, I know that you're on a time schedule, so I'll make sure to keep well under my time and make sure I'm done before 3 o'clock. I feel like it's in a grand American tradition to have a king followed by a republic with some talk about taxation and representation in between. So very appropriate. Whoever thought through that program, genius. So as shared, my name is Charlie Hyde. I'm president and CEO of the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site here in Indianapolis. And it's interesting when you're involved with an organization like ours, because you think about the American system of self-government more than just a couple times a year. And I'm sure for all of you working for the state of Indiana, that you had occasion to think about self-government more than most. But for us, and thinking about it as an organization, we really try to think about it from the larger perspective. So if you think about over the arc of American history, there have been just over 500 million citizens. Of those 500 million citizens, just over 12,000 served in Congress. I think we're up to about 115 that have been on the United States Supreme Court, but only 45 individuals and 46 administrations who have actually been president of the United States. So put that in perspective, 45 individuals out of 500 million people. There's something exceptional about those 45 individuals, and it may be good, it may be bad, it's more likely than not somewhere in between. But that's really what brings us to the conversation today. So as the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site, we represent one of those 45 presidents that have served our country since its founding. And I would suggest, even though Benjamin Harrison is not very well known, even within his own state, that you actually know Benjamin Harrison better than you might think. So when you think about Benjamin Harrison, you may not think about the Pledge of Allegiance. But when you say the Pledge of Allegiance, you're doing something that Benjamin Harrison helped encourage as a grand tradition, a grand American tradition. So it was actually during his administration from 1889 to 1893 that the Pledge of Allegiance was written and that he called for its use in public schools. He also then, as Centennial President, 100 years after George Washington's inauguration, he called for the American flag to be flown in front of schools and public buildings. If you know Ellis Island, you know Benjamin Harrison. So Ellis Island was opened during Harrison's administration, and that was in part because of an impetus to consolidate and to standardize what it looked like for new immigrants to be able to come into this country. So if you know Ellis Island, you know Benjamin Harrison. If you've heard of something called the Sherman Antitrust Act, then you know Benjamin Harrison. He actually called for it during his administration and signed it. Of course, it was wielded to greatest effect by Theodore Roosevelt and subsequent administrations, but that was something that Benjamin Harrison really sought to call to account. When you think about our rights and responsibilities as citizens, that extends to our lives in the public sphere, whether working for companies or working for local, regional, state, national. If you've heard about the National Forest System, you've heard about Benjamin Harrison. It was actually during Harrison's administration that he called for and signed the Forest Reserve Act. Now, he was twice senator from the state of Indiana, and he was senator from Indiana, but he sought twice as senator from the state of Indiana to ensure protections for the Grand Canyon, and both of those efforts were unsuccessful. So it was only when he became president of the United States that he was able to successfully protect the Grand Canyon through the powers granted to him through the Forest Reserve Act. So you had 22 presidents that preceded him. There had only been one national park created among those 22 presidents, with protections given to Yellowstone by Lincoln and then further protections by Grant. So it was really under Benjamin Harrison that our country's legacy around protecting natural resources nationally began. So again, if you know the national parks, you know Benjamin Harrison. If any of these gentlemen look like Benjamin Harrison other than the one in the middle, they are not Benjamin Harrison. So this is a trick slide. Only the one in the middle is Benjamin Harrison, but if we ever have a Benjamin Harrison movie biopic, not unlike the King biopic, any of these fine gentlemen, I'm sure, could portray Benjamin Harrison. If you're aware of these 6 states All 6 of these states were admitted to the Union by Benjamin Harrison, so the most by any president other than George Washington himself. And you may also be aware of these government entities that were initiated under Benjamin Harrison. So when you think about the weather, or if you think about standardized geographic place names, those are small, underknown things that Benjamin Harrison contributed to as President of the United States. I think one of those things that is so compelling about his administration was what he sought to accomplish in good faith. He wasn't seeking recognition, he wasn't seeking attention. After his administration, he was willing to go quietly into retirement. It's something that we may wish more of from our politicians going forward, but certainly is something that I think we could all learn from. And I'm not going to read all of this, but I just want to highlight the fact that it's so interesting, again, being so close to this history, the things that we get to see in these interconnections between the presidents. There are so many places and so many areas where legacy comes into play. The work that we do in our own generation is so important as we think ahead to future generations. We never know the ways that it will have positive or negative implications, but to act in good faith, you can find that you can influence the future in positive ways. So you may have heard the statement that the past is not dead. It's not even past. I think Faulkner famously said that. And I think that's especially true when you look at these presidential legacies, and in our case specifically with Benjamin Harrison's. So during his administration, you had the beginnings of the automobile industry. You also then had famous works of art. I think one of the most popular exhibits last summer, I guess we're almost out of summer, was the Loom at the Indianapolis Museum of Art, Newfields. And of course, the Starry Night was painted during Harrison's administration. You had Rodin famously sculpting the Thinker, and then you can see some of these famous companies, including GE and Nintendo, that were both founded during that time that Benjamin Harrison was serving as President of the United States. So who was this 23rd President of the United States? Now, I think that it's compelling when you think about his family story. He definitely had a legacy, a civic legacy that he was carrying forward. So he came from a founding family. Benjamin Harrison V, pictured here, was actually a signer of the Declaration of Independence. His grandfather was William Henry Harrison, who was 9th President of the United States. And just to make clear, it was William Henry Harrison that only survived 1 year into office. Benjamin Harrison did serve all 4 years of his term. He was a Hoosier by choice. He was born on the border between Ohio and Indiana. And if you ever hear Ohio, they claim, I think, 6 presidents, including Benjamin Harrison, but he was actually elected by the state of Indiana, so we can claim him as our own. And you've maybe even seen that at the state line. I think it says Abraham Lincoln's boyhood home, and Benjamin Harrison, America's Hoosier president. So I'll just note here this picture, again, Hoosier by choice. He and his wife Caroline actually chose Indianapolis over Cincinnati and Chicago. So he was a volunteer soldier in the Civil War. He decided to fight for the Union cause, was a volunteer, and actually answered that service in response to Governor Morton and certainly to Lincoln's call for 300,000 new troops. So Harrison, in spite of having a young family and a burgeoning career as an elected official, actually forego those responsibilities to serve his country, returning to them as he was able. And this is actually his, he's breveted as Brigadier General by Abraham Lincoln. So we have this document. If you were to tour the Presidential Site Museum, we are open 7 days a week, so you would have an opportunity to be able to see this. So he returned to Indianapolis after the Civil War, and he continued to grow that burgeoning legal career, and he came to even greater attention locally, statewide, regionally, nationally, as a lawyer and as an orator. So you can see the picture here. This is actually the house that we currently maintain as the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site here in Indianapolis at 12th and Delaware Street. He actually conducted a front porch campaign from those very front steps. He gave over 80 speeches to more than 300,000 people. And so really brought Indianapolis to the national stage in a way that had never been done before. In fact, on the night that he received that nomination, over 10% of Indianapolis's population turned out on his front porch. So that's over 8,000 people that swarmed around that house at 1230 North Delaware Street. And so, of course, rising to the presidency nationally certainly brought him greater renown. But he understood again that it came with not just rights but responsibilities. And I think that that's the theme through all of this, is that he understood that whether as a private citizen or as an elected official, that he had rights and responsibilities. And so he sought, again, to pursue those responsibilities in good faith and to see them through in a way that was certainly incumbent upon him in that office. So that brings us to looking at Benjamin Harrison's legacy, certainly in advocating for protecting our natural resources nationally, advocating for protecting civil rights, especially in an era when trying to understand how you could best encourage and support black civil rights. He was outspoken in his advocacy for that. He also sought then to call upon corporations, businesses to meet their responsibilities in the public sphere. He once said, "I pity the man that wants a coat so cheap that the man or woman who makes it starves in the process." So again, holding people to account and understanding their rights and responsibilities. So as the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site, much in the same way, we seek to encourage people to better participate in their American system of self-government through the life, stories, arts, and culture of an American president. Again, in our case, it's Benjamin Harrison, and we've been able to, through our programs, through our outreach, through our special events, throughout the year, we've been able to find ways to do so across the community, across generations, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So we have risen over the past 7 years from, I believe, number 19 out of 150 some things to do in Indianapolis to now number 2 out of 169 things to do in Indianapolis. And that's been made possible in large part because of the quality of the staff that we have working at the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site, because of the quality of the volunteers that we have at the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site. And I'm looking at two of my favorite people right here. Kathy, can you wave a little bit? There we go. And Jennifer, can you wave a little bit? So we are very fortunate to have tremendous supporters that are helping us advance our work. And I think you'll find, if you look at our website or if you look at some of the materials there in front of you, you'll find ways that you can better engage with the organization and see the ways that you too might be able to participate in helping advance this work. So this is just an array of some of the programs that we offer each year. So again, trying to find ways in which we can help bring the next generation into a better understanding of their American system of self-government, how they can better participate in governance, and understanding how important it is to pass that baton from generation to generation. So we utilize our 2.5 acres right at the crossroads of the crossroads in downtown Indianapolis. I'm sure, again, you've seen us there at 6570 and Delaware Street and 12th Street. Again, making sure that we're utilizing that nationally significant collection of over 10,000 artifacts, so that we're utilizing that National Historic Landmark home, and we're being mindful of that tremendous legacy that the only president elected from the state of Indiana has helped bring to national attention through that story. So some of the programs and events that we have going on throughout this year, we have a new exhibit called No Compact of Silence, Black Civil Rights Advocates in the Harrison Era. As I mentioned, we're now number 2 out of 169 things to do in Indianapolis. We have events throughout the year, including this week. We have our Off the Record. That's an annual event that looks at each of the 3 branches of government by drawing from the insights of prominent Hoosiers. And then coming up in November, we'll have Mo Rocca at our Mary Tucker Jasper Speaker Series on November 10th, so on Veterans Day Eve. We serve as a polling site. We recognize it's not just enough to call other people to do their duty, but we need to do ours as well. So recognizing that vital need for polling sites and voting centers in our community, that's something we stepped up to in 2015, and we've called upon our peers locally and nationally to step up to as well. We also serve as a naturalization site, so partnering with a federal court each year. And I can tell you just on July 1st this year, working with the federal court and Judge Sarah Evans Barker, we were able to help as 75 new citizens took their oath of citizenship at the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site. I think we had about 500 total celebrants there. So again, modeling these ways in which we can all rise to the occasion as citizens. So thinking about this and its larger implications, I think it comes back to this idea of how can we increase public participation in this American system of self-government. So for Harrison, he articulated this, I think, in ways that were more eloquent than many of us could manage, other than perhaps the king himself. But apart from that, perfect timing, thank you. Thank you. A round of applause there, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And so in all of this, we understand that we can invest of ourselves in others. So for us, that means programs like our Future Presidents of America initiative that actually seeks to engage young leaders between the ages of 13 and 16 in learning more about American history and the presidents of the United States through the stories of those 45 executives. And so this is an annual program that we have been able to expand now well beyond Indiana. So the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum is now offering our Future Presidents of America program, as is Andrew Jackson's The Hermitage. So actually that's a great credit to Jennifer Hodge and her work. So thank you, Jennifer. And we find that there's no better moment than now to pursue these ways and understanding what we have and making sure that we don't lose it. So I thought about this quote, especially in the midst of the pandemic, and I will read this out loud. Benjamin Harrison said, "And after all, this beautiful emblem of liberty never shines so well as when its background is dark. It has been loved best when the clouds were low." It certainly calls it to all of our attention and awareness when the clouds are low. Just what a stark contrast it is not to have these rights, which we as citizens of the United States are so blessed with. So as we look to the future, and again, I'll wrap up in the next 5 minutes if I'm, okay, thank you, sir. Looking to our future and the ways in which we can continue to invest of ourselves in this community, we announced in April of 2021 a $6 million capital campaign. And I'm glad to report that we have exceeded our goal for that capital campaign. And we are deep, thank you. And we are deep in the midst of construction, meeting our commitments through that capital campaign. So if you've not been to the presidential site since 4th grade, I'm sure there are a few of you here, now is the time for you to come and visit us. Again, we're completing construction within the National Historic Landmark itself. We're investing nearly $2 million in the historic structure. And as I mentioned, over $4 million across our grounds, really finding ways in which we can elevate this story, in which we can make sure that people understand their system of self-government. They can participate in it, and it's something that they can embrace and take part in. So just as a quick snapshot of the ways that this will transform the Benjamin Harrison Presidential Site, I'll quickly make my way through these images, and I can say with great pride, and in part because of the hard work of our staff and our board and our volunteers, what you see here as a kind of a fanciful rendering is not just a fanciful rendering anymore. This is actually how it's materialized. So you can come and make sure that I'm telling you the truth yourself. So again, this is very much looking at what we have and how we can invest in the future of Indianapolis, how we can invest in the future of Indiana, and how we can invest in the future of this country. So you see here the Judge Sarah Evans Barker Citizenship Plaza. You see the sky view that shows the founding documents and Indiana limestone cases here. You can see the Book of History. You can see the Stan and Sandy Hurt Presidential Promenade leading up to the historic structure itself. And you can see the Neighborway. As many of you know, 50 years ago, the interstate itself cut its way through downtown neighborhoods. So in our own way, we're helping rectify one of these wrongs with the creation of the Neighborway that restores east-west connectivity between Delaware Street and Pennsylvania for pedestrians and bicyclists. We're also, as I mentioned, with the $2 million and improvements to the historic structure, are making substantial improvements to the museum itself, thinking of those capital items that are so difficult to get interest in, from tuck pointing to roof, to windows, to plasterwork, but also then finding ways that we can encourage the next generation to come and research and learn and engage in the stories that we have to share. So I would invite you to, again, come and visit us in the coming months to be able to see this for yourself as it comes to full completion. As I mentioned, the Future Presidents of America program, if you know anyone between the ages of 13 and 16, just go to futurepresidents.us and you can encourage them to take leadership in their own community. Also then, this is a national initiative called Project POTUS. I would encourage you on two fronts. One, if you know middle schoolers in social studies that are interested in winning prizes, they can submit 1-minute videos on any of the 45 presidents to win prizes. I would encourage you to look more at projectpotus.org, but we are also looking for citizen jurors. So as I mentioned, these are 1-minute videos, and we anticipate receiving, if not hundreds, thousands of videos as we go into our second year. So we are seeking bright minds to help us review the videos and make sure that we choose the absolute best. So just by way of conclusion, I'll share Benjamin Harrison in his very own words. He said, "Do not be ashamed to love the flag or confess your love of it. Make much of it, tell its history, sing of it." So I'll leave you with that thought. As you head out into the world today, I hope that you continue to sing of your love of this country. Thank you.